The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services, a leading provider of quality and experienced virtual chief information security officers for small and mid-sized businesses. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Matt Dechant joins us today. He is the founder of MD3 Consulting, providing virtual CISO services to small and mid-sized businesses. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about your cyber journey, how you got started in IT, InfoSec, cyber, why you did it, because it can be a stressful field. And then eventually, really would love to see how you pivoted and why you pivoted being a virtual CISO, which of course, as you know, is a passion for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I've always liked solving puzzles and working with my hands. And so my background in college was mechanical engineering. Definitely information security is one big puzzle to solve. Not only is it just figuring out products and services and, how to stop hackers, but there's such a human element to the journey here, and, convincing people that there's something in it for everybody here by being more secure. So such a huge behavior change element to getting a successful program up and running. So I spent a lot of time in information technology. At one point, I was running around the world configuring networks for a global design company, and traveling to far off places like Mumbai and Tokyo. That company did a lot of healthcare work, and again, this is where the intersection of the sort of the human and tech, and especially privacy, come into. We were doing things like organ transplant systems, and transporting them, on airplanes, keeping kidneys and livers alive, doing things like surgical equipment or insulin pens, and these ultimately would result in having to do interviews in people's homes, and so. You wound up being very front and center to the kind of human part of protecting these people that were sharing such sensitive information. From there, I moved on to a role as a CISO in a company that was using genomic information to help cure cancer. And about that time, sort of realized that because of my design experience and sort of just working with people and building out new programs, that I wanted to do that all the time. Rather than sort of sitting in one company with one singular focus. And so I had this great interview actually with a large telco company. And they said, you'd be a perfect fit for this job here, but I think you might be pretty bored here because we just want to kind of like keep the lights on, maybe cut some costs, and you like really designing and building things all day, every day. And so that was the final sign for me that it was time to form my own company. And so I formed it in 2020 and been off to the races ever since.
So, and you provide virtual CISO services. Well, first of all, let me ask, do you pronounce it CISO, CISO?
I pronounce it CISO. Yeah.
Okay. I know that there's such a thing on LinkedIn about how to pronounce it, but I believe CISO is the one that wins out the most. Pretty much small and mid-sized businesses is who you promote, you work with?
Yeah, I definitely work with small and medium-sized businesses. They're usually companies that are they're either startups or they are scaling rapidly, and they typically have some sense that they know they have to do something, but they're not really sure how to get started, or they've got a person with some skills who does it part-time or 10% of the time, and they know they need to do something. And usually that's, in many ways, that's triggered by their customers, right? They may have, you imagine a company of 200, 300 people making $80 million a year, or maybe much less than that. And they're trying to do business with a huge pharma company, or a bank that's been in business for 120 years, or some other behemoth. And that behemoth wants you to do things the way the behemoth does them, of course.
Right.
And so I find myself front and center to doing sort of a translation, right? At this small, scrappy company, we're doing the appropriate security for our size and scope and scale. And here's how it translates to, your heavy bureaucratic, approach.
Sometimes the smaller ones actually are a little bit easier to work with because they can be a little bit more agile. And the larger you go up the bureaucracy, the more silos, the more issues you may have. Well, yeah, I see you've been doing this for several years now, and so you've gotten significant exposure to SMBs. What would you say is like one of the more prevalent threats today to a small, mid-sized business out there, or a medium business?
Yeah,
I guess I always say mid-sized, but yeah.
yeah. I think there's probably several, and the most prevalent right now here, I think, is artificial intelligence. I do think, again, you had mentioned, and you're totally correct here, these companies are small and agile, of course, and they're trying to get a competitive edge in the marketplace. And so leveraging AI seems like a pretty straightforward way to do it. Why develop something new when you can just go get it, apparently, right, by entering something into ChatGPT. What I think the real danger is, and I've spent a lot of time just in the last month with all of my client base talking about this, is, you go to Google and you do a search and you get some results. Now imagine you did a search for the best food for Portuguese water dogs, right? And instead of just getting, the top 10 results for dog food, anybody new that searches now knows that Matt Dechant has Portuguese water dogs and what kind of food he eats. So in other words, the results are recursive. It's not just a private search, although we could argue that that's not a private search at all in the first place on Google. But imagine that it's recursive, and now your search becomes part of the zeitgeist or larger result. And so, the counsel to my clients now is to think of you having a conversation in public about trade secrets about your company. You would never do that. But when you feed, protected information, sensitive information to a search like that, it becomes part of the answer for somebody else.
Yeah, and that actually just was in the news last week, I think, with Samsung.
Yes.
Remember talking about it on the podcast, where they in essence did exactly that, where in the innocent course of asking a question and wanting to feed it more information to get a correct answer, they ended up oversharing, I guess you could say, and that could be a breach.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's funny that you mentioned, you're the first one that has actually mentioned AI as an answer to that question.
Oh, interesting.
Usually I'll get the answers of like ransomware or business email compromise are some of the big ones. But I agree, because and I'm giving away a little bit of secrets now to probably to my clients who may be listening. Every year I create a tabletop exercise for our clients. It's one of the fun things I like to do in my job. And it's always like thinking about like the scenario to do. Well, this year decided that, with all the ChatGPT stuff and the AI, we're going to do one with AI. So I just started writing it like 2 days ago, and you have now affirmed me that that's the good way to go. So I appreciate that very much.
Well, yeah, happy to support for whoever else is listening, and hopefully not all your clients. But I think I do think that this is a very interesting tool that we have in our hands now. You can do a tremendous amount of work in there, but it is just that. It's just a tool, and it is driven by some external forces here in terms of what happens to that information, right? You don't have a private AI system yet. You can't. There's no paid for service.
Right. And to your point about it being just a tool, a lot of this sounds somewhat similar to some of the arguments, if you will, back in the 80s, as far as calculators got more powerful. You mentioned mechanical engineering. I was a mechanical engineering major myself as well. And it was during the period of time when some of these really great function calculators doing diffie-qs and all this stuff on it. It's like, wow, I don't have to learn how to do differential equations, but actually,
right.
but you actually did, because you had to understand the input. And I think that ChatGPT and other AIs are going to be essentially the same thing. It's like, when all is said and done, it's just a tool, but you got to learn how to use it right. Otherwise, you're going to hurt yourself.
No, absolutely right. Yeah, like anything, it can be very dangerous if you don't know how to use that tool, right? And you're best served by, even if you decide that this is not for me and I don't want to use this for business purposes, you have to understand the just the ubiquity that's happening with this. And maybe you're the CEO of this small or medium sized business and you've decided not to use it, but your employee base may be. We face this also in that historical problem of shadow IT, right? Um,
Hmm.
we've got these 8 applications that definitely everybody knows about, and they're used all day, every day: a Salesforce, a GitHub. And then there's 50 other ones that were bought with a credit card or were free. And there's a
Yeah,
bunch of
nothing's free.
information on there. Yeah, free.
Right.
And they're being used for as strong and or as important business purposes as the ones that are sanctioned. And so, look, you and I are in the information security business. We've got to go follow the information wherever it is.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's something we know about or don't, and we definitely can't protect it if we don't know about it.
Right. Right. One other thing too with ChatGPT is, and this was actually, I think, one of the first things that we started to look into using it for is to help write policies.
Sure.
It almost, I did it last night. It's like create a incident response plan template for a small consulting company, and it comes up with this nice list of everything, and you look at it and you think, well, my job is done. But I
Yeah.
think that's another risk for SMBs as well, because you probably have run across this where you have a small mid-sized business that they needed to have like one or more policies put in place. So they go out, they get a template, they scratch out company and put in their name, and then they publish it. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I used to do when I was, and I still do it occasionally, but I don't do as much evaluation of policies anymore, like doing third-party vendor risk assessments. But when I was doing that more often, I'd take like if it sounded like that it was too good, I'd highlight part of it and do a search on that text. And if it came up with all these other ones, it's like, okay, obviously somebody used the same template. Now, turning back to AI, it's almost the same thing where they're starting to have tools out there where the tools can detect whether or not what you've written is likely from AI. And so think about this. What would you think that like an auditor who comes in does like a SOC 2 audit and is looking at one of the policies, runs it through their AI like checker, and it has a 96% confidence that this was written by AI. What do you think the reaction is going to be for the auditor there?
Well, yeah, certainly, and I've been on both sides of that fence. I would suspect, although and hopefully quickly verify that. Well, let me step back a bit here. I think that you can come up with some great documentation by
Hmm.
plugging in AI. You can at least get a checklist of what to do. The
Sure.
problem or issue that we have here, especially for our clientele, is that then they haven't consumed it. There hasn't been a
Right.
cathartic process for developing it, and they actually probably don't support the language. It's not written in their author's voice.
Hmm.
It's not well understood. Maybe they read it once or twice in an edit session, and that was it. So they haven't consumed it, and they don't
Right.
actually practice it. And so what do auditors do? They look at policies and plans, and then they go searching for real world evidence that happens. It's an immediate red flag to see what looks to be like something that was scraped off the public internet or fed back out from AI systems. There's a very low chance that the real world access control or something else that you're auditing is going to actually reflect what's in that document, that policy or plan. So
Right. And I
then it's failed. Then the administrative control has failed.
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly the mitigation. So long as like whether you take a template from Chat GPT or off the shelf and you put your name in it and all that, if you can support that you do that, then you're fine. But you don't end right there. And sometimes if you take a template and you just put your name on it, you sometimes realize that maybe you're over promising things that you necessarily don't need to promise as well too. I guess would be part
Yeah,
of it as
that,
well.
that's
Um,
absolutely true. Absolutely true. Yeah, so you have to have a methodology as you develop these controls, and they are controls. And I would say more broadly, whoever you're working with at your client needs to understand that whether it's on a piece of paper or it's some sort of encryption or it's a camera or door lock, a physical control, the same sort of rigor has to be applied to putting these in place. They have to work. They have to, work every day. They have to be reusable. People have to understand why they're in place so they don't circumvent them. We're always coming back to sort of the human component here. If you have 42 ways in which you've got to get to a system to do your job, and you show up at 8 a.m. and it takes you till 8:45 to get going, you're going to very quickly find some ways to get around all that security, and then we're in a bad place. So policy sometimes is the only thing we have when we can't figure out a technical or physical control.
I just chuckled at the 8 a.m. because I sometimes show up at 5:30 in the morning.
Well, I'm up early too, but yeah.
I love what I do, and it's they say if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. That's not entirely true. There are some working days, but and speaking about virtual CISO stuff, what would you think? Just from your experience, I'm curious. Well, let me tee this up a little bit first. I've done a little short series on YouTube about cybersecurity consulting. Some of the things that I have learned during the 6 years that I've been doing this, not from the cyber so much as the business standpoint, the insurance, all the stuff that comes with being an independent business owner. I've got an extended version of a presentation that I gave at a couple of conferences on YouTube. But what has been like a challenge that you have found being a vCISO entrepreneur for the last several years?
That's a great question. I would say I've been fairly fortunate. I think, I don't know if you classify yourself as being in the Midwest, but I certainly am here in Chicago. And there's something to really be said about Midwestern nice, and where that translates to where I've, been on this journey for the last 3 years is I've been very fortunate to have a very strong network of security professionals. Some of them are in-house, some of them like you, and we've spoken previously, are just staying connected because we're passionate about our work and we look for opportunities to work together. But a lot of work is not where a lot of companies might have to cold call or kind of find that company that didn't even know they were looking, right? So far, I've been very fortunate to have companies who know they have to do something about their security program. They know they have to improve rather than convincing them. And I would say the other way that I think it works well is to approach companies from as high in the organization as possible here. We can't have, or it's very difficult to build out a program when you look at the C-suite. Let's say there's 5 of them, and one of them just has a very strong opinion that either we're okay and I don't need to spend any money on this, or they just are very resistant to the change required to put the security in place. That can really stall or completely cancel your efforts to build a program here. So trying to stay in contact at a board level, a CEO level, C-suite level, I find is very helpful getting the mission done.
I chuckled a little bit when you said cold calling because I tried that in the beginning, and I'm absolutely horrible at it, first of all. And I totally agree with you. It's like if they don't know that they need it, they're not going to be receptive to the conversation. And I actually felt a little dirty doing it. So it's just I can't do it. I can't cold call. But to your point, as far as affecting change, that's one of the things that I've found too as a virtual CISO that the field has changed over the last few years where there's like kind of like a separation of different types of virtual CISOs. Some like more like you and me, where we've got that deep risk management experience. We've been CISOs before. We understand the need to explain to the C-suite board of directors the hows and the whys to build a holistic information security program. But then you've got others that I have found that are undercutting the price with very substandard services. They're more like along the lines of IT security managers. They're focusing just on the technical. And unfortunately, I think that does a disservice in the virtual CISO field as well. So
Absolutely.
I'll
Absolutely.
get off my soapbox now because I can be soapboxy about that. So,
No, I'm strongly opinionated about it as well, both from a position of the professional advice is substandard when you take a maybe a competent security engineer who is in-house. They go to a boot camp and they slap a vCISO sticker, right, or badge on them, and suddenly they're able to talk at a sort of an executive level about strategy around security.
mhm,
And I do think that there's a place in the market for that type of work, but it's not strategy consulting. It's not capability
exactly.
building of an entire program. It's a very specialized thing where you might bring someone like that in to implement a project. I would much rather come in as a trusted partner than a vendor that's going to just do a 4 or 6 week project. We're looking to build out typically a new capability in a company. There is no security program there. It's not like it was established and maybe run poorly, although that is another opportunity to do good.
Mhm.
Most of my clientele don't have one, and so we're starting from zero. You have to be creative about it. A person like that, unless they came from another background that gave them those skills, or if they just came up technical and they're an analyst or engineer or architect, they don't have those skills.
Yeah, and I know I'm biased, but this is not one area to be cheap in, so to speak. You get what you pay for, and if you're looking for a virtual CISO that has deep risk management experience, like you, for example, you're going to be more of a premium than somebody who's a good infosec analyst who got the vCISO thing slapped to their or the CISO label slapped to them. And even to that point too, it's just like I've seen where they have like a vCISO certification. That doesn't make you a virtual CISO. It just means that you
No,
went through a course and you paid some money. And I caution people that you really have to ask them about their risk management philosophy, their skill set, and what they've done. So
absolutely
um,
right. Absolutely right.
yeah,
And
I'm
we see
glad.
this internally as well. With I find myself hiring many people for my clients, right?
Mhm.
And we see that same skills gap on the other side too. This is not just just so we're not on our both on our soapboxes about our particular issues that we have for running our companies. There's a problem internally with security talent generally, right?
Oh,
We
yeah,
just
yeah,
have
yeah.
to be consistent.
No, I totally agree, and that's part of the reason why I like to do this podcast. And there are a lot of other folks that help to that help small, mid-sized businesses kind of understand the differentiators, not only in the CISO field, but also in some of the other areas of cyber and information security as well. Because
Or
you
yeah,
figure it's not their core competency. Their job is to make widgets, and your job is to make sure that they have a holistic security program so that they can continue to make widgets when all is said and done.
I mean,
So,
look, there's easy comparisons to other industries or other C-suite members and what they do, right? Typically, a company of certain size is going to have a chief financial officer. Why?
mhm,
Because you run into your limits of what you can do in Quicken, and you need somebody to really understand, how to plan out a financial future in 3 years,
right,
right? You can, of course, have a lawyer on retainer, or you can have general counsel because you deal with a lot of contracts, or you have HIPAA compliance, or any of a number of things in which you've got to have that expertise. These companies, the market is hot, and uh, information security, good talent is expensive because the
right.
marketplace is driving a lot of that. And so this offers a way for a company to get that executive expertise while not having to employ a full-time person.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So, future plans. Well, no, wait, before future plans, I forgot to
Yes.
ask about what do you do to de-stress? Because you are not only in cybersecurity, information security, but you are also an entrepreneur. And I also wear those hats. And I can tell you from my experience that it can be stressful. And I always like to know what people do to de-stress because sometimes it gives me good ideas. So what's one thing you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we talk about getting up early. So I get up every day I go to 6 a.m. CrossFit. So that typically gets the workout out of the way, and I can start my day properly and hopefully go to bed early so I can do it again the next day. So that does help a lot. I have an opportunity to go in and just sort of, the workout's on the wall, go heads down, don't think about it, get it done, not think about work, anything else. So sun comes up, it's great.
So
And so that's,
important to get that in every day.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. On top of that, I do a lot of woodworking and metalworking, and
Mhm.
we've done some house renovations, and so I do like working with my hands. We've got a cool project where we're taking some vintage cabinets right now and building a new sort of custom walk-in closet, and kind of making it really bespoke. You'll see tons of these things on Instagram about hacking this and hacking that. So we're hacking some furniture into sort of all-inclusive closet. And then the project that was probably the most fun that we worked on in the last year or so is we took a 1977 Airstream, and we gutted the inside and renovated it. And it's been on its maiden voyage last year. Did okay, but that was a really fun project.
Oh, that's something that my wife and I want to do. We've talked about buying an Airstream. I don't know about necessarily refurbishing it ourselves, but
Yeah.
that is. I keep on saying that I have these retirement plans, but I think I've already retired once or twice already, and I keep on finding something else to do. So,
Well,
what
you're
are
welcome to
your
welcome to come and see it, and I can tell you about all the pain and suffering.
next
But
time I'm up in Chicago? I may take you up on that. So,
absolutely happy to have you.
outside of CrossFit every morning and closet renovations and Airstream travels, what future plans do you have?
Yeah, so we're looking at to expand the business here. What we should have some sort of public-facing, website and marketing materials here shortly. I'm very interested in part of the expansion of the business is one of the things we talked about previously, which is that we have a huge deficit in not only the number of people doing information security work, but we also have a deficit in their skills. We
Mm.
have always had a deficit in any sort of technical field to have diversity and inclusion. That's a huge problem. We have veterans that aren't, finding jobs out of their military service. We need to help them as well. And so just trying to really focus on how can we offer sort of an all-inclusive way that may be a combination of going back to college or going to this trade school or taking this certification. What's a holistic way that and some internal training as well? How can we make things better? And then I think, as you and I have talked about, there's plenty of opportunity for all the VCSOs, throughout the United States and maybe even more broadly to figure out a way to work better together. There's
Yes,
a lot of opportunity.
there's a
Yeah,
lot of opportunity. There's a lot of good folks out there, and I think that we're still in the early growing stages of the field, and it's kind of exciting to see it grow. So,
absolutely.
well,
Yeah,
Matt, thank you so much for spending some time this morning. I thoroughly enjoyed the talk. I could go on and talk about the VCSO stuff, but it's like I can't do the soapbox thing all the time. I mean, we got time limited. So, but I do appreciate your
another
time. I
time.
appreciate all that you do in the industry as well.
Thank you, Greg. It was a pleasure being here.
Awesome. And everybody, stay secure.